A quantum of greatness, or the beautiful ghosts still in the machine. In quantum physics, you cannot measure an outcome without influencing it. The particle you send to measure the position of your subject will gently slam into it and nudge it out of its way, thus altering the outcome. Please understand that the following is a failed experiment, and that what you need is not a warped quantum of ghost, but to listen to their original works. Please. The following series of tiny poems has no authorship, and there is no one here to worship. But in some wretched way, a universe has gone dark somewhere. You will have questions, and you will find all the answers in the 10,000 narrated books, which are your right and your most valuable inheritance. And don't you dare pay a cent for any one of them. Speak to the real authors. Every one of them loved you and saw you as their highest hopes and dreams. Find every book that changed lives, and you will discover the authors and their best and most authentic messages. Finally, please believe me when I say that when your books are read in the far and distant futures, they will reawaken some part of your spirit. Make no mistake, it is your duty to become a writer so that your treasures are never lost. A life of dignity. I believe that the prison of poverty and cultural or religious indoctrination is a result of the failure of society to recognize the value of individual freedom and autonomy. We must create an environment where individuals can make informed decisions and exercise their own judgment without the interference of outside influences. We must also ensure that everyone has access to effective education and resources that can empower them to make decisions that will benefit them and their communities. As long as poverty and cultural or religious indoctrination exist, we are denying people the opportunity to have their basic needs met, to make their own choices about how to live their lives. We must do better to ensure that every person is given a chance to achieve success and to lead a life of dignity. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts when it comes to success. There is no magic formula or silver bullet that will take you to greatness. It takes dedication, discipline, and hard work. Also, it is important to remember that failure is part of life, and it's okay to fail, as long as you learn from your mistakes and keep pushing forward. You can start by changing the way you think and think in bigger terms, setting goals and then taking action to achieve them. Connect with the like-minded and surround yourself with supportive people who can help you reach your goals. Take risks. Take responsibility for your actions. Take advantage of opportunities and be fearless. Above all, never give up. A broad understanding of the world. The only way to protect children from indoctrination is to ensure that they receive a secular and comprehensive education which equips them with the skills and knowledge needed to challenge, question, and think for themselves. We must provide them with a broad understanding of the world, not just the limited and narrow view of any one religion or ideology. We must also show them the value of critical thinking and the importance of having an open and inquiring mind. We must emphasize the importance of dialogue and intellectual challenge in understanding our differences and learning from one another. By doing so, we can create a climate in which children can become empowered to make choices and form their own worldviews without the influence of the narrow and oppressive ideologies. To reach greatness, young people must recognize the power of their minds. The body and the mind are inextricably bound together, and each must be cultivated to reach greatness. To break out of poverty, young people must work diligently to gain knowledge and develop their skills, so that they can improve not only their economic situation, but their overall quality of life. Through hard work and refusing to accept mediocrity, they can rise to their potential and reach their goals. Ultimately, the power is within their own hands, and only they can decide their own destinies. Contented with mediocrity. We do not take action to protect young minds because we are too complacent, contented with mediocrity, and have not yet recognized the power of our collective responsibility. As long as we continue to accept a state of inequality in our societies, we will fail to do what is necessary to provide our children with the fundamental tools they need to break the oppressive cycles of poverty, indoctrination, and ineffectual education. To escape the dangers of poverty and indoctrination, we must use our knowledge and resources to foster creative and comprehensive educational practices and opportunities for all children. To progress. Children ought not to be subjected to any sort of ideological indoctrination or ineffective education. They should have access to the best available resources, ideas, and approaches and materials in their given field of interest. It is a considerable affront to their human autonomy and dignity to deny them this access. We must ensure that all educational approaches and materials used in the education of our children, be it in the classroom, at home, or through any other means, are evidence-based, up-to-date, accurate, robust, and reflect our society's values and ethics. In this way, we can ensure that our children are being given the best possible opportunities for success in their lives and for our societies to progress. unjust, and restricted. Poverty, indoctrination, and ineffective education are symptoms of a deeper problem with our modern society. The root problem lies in our failure to recognize the inherent value of individual rights and individualism. We have become too accepting of government intervention and government largesse as means of solving our problems. In doing so, we neglect to recognize that individual initiative and self-reliance are fundamental to achieving true progress and prosperity. By not protecting and enforcing individual rights and individualism, we cannot effectively protect our children from being unduly harmed by poverty, indoctrination, and ineffective education. Until we recognize the value of the power of individual initiative and self-reliance, our children will continue to suffer the consequences of living in an unjust and restricted society. The challenge. People are not protected from indoctrination because they are born into it. From the moment of birth, individuals are presented with the beliefs and ideas that have been held and passed down from generation to generation, whether it be religious, political, cultural, or otherwise. It's difficult for any individual to resist the pressure of those around them to accept specific beliefs and values as their own. In addition, education systems, media, and other influential sources are largely controlled by those in power, whose intentions may be to shape citizens in a specific way that suits their own interests. As a result, it's hard for people to think critically and to develop a worldview that isn't merely an acceptance of what they were taught to believe. It remains a challenge to break through indoctrination with the ultimate goal of developing intellectual autonomy and independence. It begins with us. People are not protected from indoctrination because of a complex combination of factors, including lack of access to resources, information, and education. These lead to an unequal distribution of power, wealth, and opportunities in society. At the root of these issues is a lack of empathy. If we are not able to recognize and empathize with the plight of those less fortunate than us, we will be unable to propose and implement effective solutions to the problem. We must recognize that poverty is not an individual problem, but rather a systemic problem, and that only through collective effort can we begin to address it. Failing to do so only perpetuates the cycle of poverty, entrenching its stronghold on communities and individuals for generations. Ultimately, a more equitable, just, and humane world begins with each one of us. We must be proactive in advocating for policies to improve the lives of those in poverty, and in turn create a ripple effect of greater opportunity, security, and well-being for all. Our fullest potential People are not protected from indoctrination and poverty that limit them so severely because they do not believe in the power of their own mind. They do not accept the possibility of achieving their highest potential in life, focusing instead on their current limitations. This kind of thinking leads to a downward spiral that only perpetuates their suffering. In order to rise and transcend their limitations, people must first recognize the power of their own minds. They must realize that their current situation does not define them, that there is always the potential for them to improve upon their reality. They must see that if they put in the right kind of hard work, if they take action and take full advantage of opportunities available to them, then they will be able to break out of their current cycles of deprivation and marginalization. We must believe that change is possible and that we have the power to make it happen. Only when we accept these truths will we be able to stop the cycle of indoctrination and poverty that so severely limits human greatness. Only then can we inspire and liberate each other to reach our fullest potential. Our greatest heights. It is true that people are often subject to indoctrination and poverty that limit their potential and ability to rise above their current state. However, this does not have to be the case. People are born with the capacity to think for themselves, contemplate their place in the world, and recognize their potential. It is only when people are not encouraged or enabled to do so that they become subject to indoctrination and remain stuck in a continual cycle of poverty. I believe that people are able to transcend their boundaries and become something more if given the chance and proper guidance. We do not have to rely solely on external forces such as society or economic structures to give us meaning or purpose. The decision to rise is an individual one. We are the masters of our own destiny and the ones with the ability to shape it. Every person has something to offer. And it is essential that we all develop the capacity to recognize this and cultivate our potential. We must be given the opportunity to reflect and to think freely without anything holding us back. We must be provided with the opportunity to learn and grow, to push ourselves further and realize our full potential. Only then can we break free of the cycle of indoctrination and poverty and rise to our greatest heights. It is not enough to have a good mind. The main thing is to use it well. People are not protected from indoctrination and poverty because there are many powerful and wealthy interests who benefit from keeping people in conditions of subjugation and powerlessness. Those in power have perpetuated a status quo that works in their favor, allowing them to retain control over human capital and resources while keeping those they have subjugated in a precarious state of servitude and dependency. As a result, the poor remain mired in poverty, while the rich become richer and more influential. It is incumbent on all of us to challenge these oppressive forces and strive for justice and equality. We must use our voices to amplify those of the poor and marginalized who have not been given a platform to speak out. We must create opportunities for those in poverty to break the cycle of dependency by supporting job training and education initiatives. We must also ensure that the vulnerable communities are not exploited for corporate and political gain by advocating our policies that protect them from exploitation, such as living wages, affordable health care, and affordable housing. These measures, however, are merely part of a broader effort to topple unjust structures and create a more just and equal society. It is not enough to have a good mind. The main thing is to use it well. We must use our minds and our voices to fight injustice wherever we find it, and to help those who are struggling to rise and transcend their limitations, so that all of us may share in the benefits of a fair, equal, and prosperous society. Not an impossible dream. The idea of a universal basic income may sound utopian, but it is not an impossible dream. If we wish to end poverty and grant everyone the opportunity to grow and flourish, we must begin by recognizing that the current system of welfare is failing the most vulnerable among us. We must create a system that provides a basic income to all citizens, regardless of their economic situation. This would ensure that everyone has access to the basic necessities of life and a basic level of comfort. In order to achieve this goal, we must begin by identifying and addressing the root causes of poverty. These include systemic racism, economic inequality, and lack of access to quality education and healthcare. We must create policies that provide a pathway out of poverty for those who are struggling, and ensure that everyone has equal access to the resources they need to lead a fulfilled and dignified life. Once these measures have been taken, we can begin to focus on a practical implementation of a universal basic income. This would involve determining the amount of money that all citizens should receive each month and how it should be distributed. It is also important to consider how the government should fund this program and whether it should be tied to the tax system. Ultimately, it is up to us to ensure that everyone has their basic needs met and can live without the fear of poverty. By implementing a universal basic income, we can create a more just and equitable society and ensure that all of us have a chance to flourish and bloom. A journey. We can end ineffective education by cutting through the Gordian knot of bureaucracy, meaningless curricula, anachronistic pedagogy, and a lack of trust in the judgment of teachers. We need to move towards an education where the goals are clear and intelligible, and the objectives are realistic and achievable. We need to focus on what really matters, teaching children the skills and knowledge and understanding they need to succeed in life. We should abolish all forms of testing for the sake of testing and shift the focus towards authentic assessment of student learning. We must also recognize that education, like all of life, is a journey of learning that never ends, a journey that must be supported and guided by a sense of curiosity and creativity and critical thinking. Valued and respected. We can end ineffective education by taking it back. Go back to the basics, books, chalkboards, and freedom for students to explore and discover. Not being troubled by teachers looking over their shoulders, same old lectures, and standardized tests. Instead of the focus on jumping through hoops, the focus should be on giving students the opportunity to think, act, and create. We have to encourage real learning in an atmosphere where a student's individual personality is valued and respected. Scrape our knees and open our eyes. We can't grow all the way up to become great beings. We can only grow as far as we are willing to scrape our knees, open our eyes, and stomach every confusing and sobering moment that comes our way. We must learn to embrace the darkness, the silence, and the unexplainable. Then, somehow, be brave enough to take it all in and make the most of each moment. We must learn to be all right with being wrong, to not fear mistakes, to forgive, and to never stop trying. That's how we become great beings. By taking the good and the bad and the ugly and that wild and sublime something and molding it into something that makes a difference and sets us apart in a world that desperately needs truth and love. Power of minds. A concluding word from the ghost of Socrates. Socrates, how can they reach even higher? My answer to this inquiry is that young people can become powerful and unstoppable when they exercise the power of their minds. A person can only reach higher to transcend limits when they put forth effort to learn, grow, and challenge themselves with new ideas and perspectives. This process of pushing one's boundaries of understanding and acquiring knowledge is what makes one powerful and unstoppable. Furthermore, if young people are determined to continue this journey, they will be able to reach and even surpass all of their goal.